ready to go now because I'm late? All right. Thank you for coming. Hi, everyone. I'd like to thank you for coming today. We're here in Kennedy Plaza to address the driver shortage at RIPTA. Growing up, like many Rhode Islanders, I relied on public transportation to get to work and to get to school. It played a vital role in my young adult life, and I'm grateful that I was able to utilize the service. That's why I know that disruptions to public transportation are not just an inconvenience. They have serious implications for people's lives. Aside from stopping people from getting to work, the driver shortage at RIPTA means students in Providence cannot get to school. Just last week, students were left without viable options to get to class on 3 separate days, and even this morning the website was down. This is absolutely unacceptable. Not only is Rhode Island failing kids in the classroom, but we can't even get them to the classroom. It's heartbreaking. And after a month of kids being left on the curb, Dan McKee finally got involved. His solution to address the problem? He wrote a letter. A letter isn't a plan, it's having a pen pal. RIPTA announced in September that riders and students can expect service disruptions. On September 20th, students were left stranded without options to get to school. On September 30th, McKee said during a Channel 10 interview, "We're going to make sure that children get to school." On October 13th, after dozens of additional abandoned students, McKee wrote a letter to RIPTA. This is not action. Why do we accept this for our students? If I were governor, here's what I would do within a 72-hour period of learning that disruptions to accessing school might be a problem. My plan would have 3 phases. First, work with RIPTA to identify recently retired drivers who could begin work immediately. We would allow these drivers to continue collecting their pensions while driving as an incentive to help us get through this crisis. CEO Scott Albedesian said that nearly 60 drivers retired since the start of the pandemic. And we all know the working conditions were extra challenging during COVID, but we're no longer in the same position. Second, if retired drivers were not able to fill the void, I would have RIPTA partner with the Department of Labor and Training to identify members of the CDL community to bring them on board as quickly as possible. To assist RIPTA with the solution, I would provide full access to the governor's staff, the lieutenant governor's staff, and the staff in DOA to help make recruitment phone calls and fix the problem immediately. And after these key steps are completed and the shortage is still in place, I would then take immediate action and activate the National Guard to help. This problem should not take months to fix. I would have a solution within 72 hours. The Guard is composed of our moms and dads, brothers and sisters, sons and daughters, and aunts and uncles. They are everyday Rhode Islanders that have time and time again stepped up to serve our community. The Guard's motto is always ready, always there, and they would be prepared to act almost immediately. Many of the civilian soldiers are well trained in operating large transport vehicles and would have no issues operating a RIPTA bus and ensuring the safety of students. Dan McKee is the Commander-in-Chief of the National Guard, and he is missing in action. While this may not seem like a traditional mission for the Guard, it is not out of the ordinary. The Rhode Island National Guard was used for untraditional purposes here in 2020 to process mail ballots. And we are all aware of how big a role the National Guard played in administering tests and vaccines during the pandemic. Additionally, just last September, Massachusetts deployed over 200 members of the Guard to drive buses while the state faced a significant labor shortage. It worked there, it can work here. If the Guard can be used to process ballots, they can be used to get our children to school. Therefore, I call on Dan McKee to call up the National Guard to address this issue that has already gone on for weeks too long. To be clear, I stand with the current RIPTA drivers who deserve to be paid a fair wage. The protracted contract negotiations have led to poor working conditions and have harmed drivers and riders. By mobilizing the Guard, we can provide a small bit of relief to our current drivers who have told me they can't even call out sick because of the guilt they feel knowing that it means the kids won't get to school. We cannot allow workers to bear the brunt of failure demand transparency in action. For Hope High School in Providence that doesn't have running water in the school, identify the problem and figure out a solution. Or flooding on our highways, which has become a pattern, not the exception. March into DOT and put together a plan to mitigate this in the future. Or for today's purposes, RIPTA. Call the administrator, get answers, and come up with a plan. He is truly no plan Dan. His fingers must be aching for how much he points at other people for problems. We deserve so much better. We deserve a leader who is not afraid to roll up their sleeves and deliver on the behalf of Rhode Island. We have become so complacent that we accept letters as solutions, and kicking the can down the road is acceptable. But my God, the state deserves so much better than failed and corrupt leadership that's running it right now. I think it is time for an outsider, somebody who is not beholden to special interests, that is running the government right now. Do your job here. With that, I'll take questions.
We're going to do this a little orderly today. We're going to start with Steve and go down the line if we don't have it. All right, Pat, we'll go to you.
Ms. Kalus. Ms. Kalus, the senior leadership ranks at RIPTA are largely drawn from the political class. One, most notably, the CEO, is drawn directly from the city of Warwick, which is experiencing its own incredible financial duress based on decisions made under his leadership. Is it time to do a national search and bring in a transportation careerist specialist at a high level to run our state's mass transportation system?
I believe that, and this is a general statement that you've heard me say time and time again, and it's a problem in our state. You should be selected for a job based on what you know, not who you know. And the inability for our state to have done that has hurt our state generally. I also would say that Dan McKee is the governor, and he can get involved, and he can provide assistance, and he has it. Like I said, writing a letter isn't a plan, it's a pen pal.
Ms. Kalus, we have a labor shortage in basically almost every industry and throughout state government.
Yes.
If we're activating the National Guard to drive RIPTA buses, are we going to be just keeping them mobilized all the time for almost everything? Where would you draw the line?
We can have a plan to move forward for staffing. Part of it is making sure that we pay a fair wage. We need to get those negotiations done. And what I'm talking about is making sure that children get to school. And so if we have a limited activation, after the steps that I outlined, those steps could be valid too if we go through that hiring process, we bring the retired drivers back in without them risking their pension. That is a great way to try to mobilize the force as we work at the underlying problem. So you can do both of those things, but I'm talking about a very specific activation to help children get to school. And I believe that Rhode Islanders can agree that getting children to school, especially with the disparate impact and the communities that are impacted by this, matters.
And have you ever taken a RIPTA bus?
Have I ever taken a RIPTA bus? Not recently. I have not. But I'll tell you, I depended on public transportation in order to get to school and to get to work. And also with my workforce, if buses were unreliable, that meant that they weren't able to serve the community, specifically the medical community. So having reliable public transportation is important to being in the workforce, but it's also important to the business community as well. And it is the obligation of the state to make sure that we have a reliable public transportation system. There's a lot of work that we need to do in terms of expanding it, and that's a big priority of mine. But making sure that it's reliable and we expand responsibly is a big deal. It is very stressful to rely on a bus to go to work and feel like you're going to get fired if you show up late and it wasn't even your fault. And I know what that feeling is like when it's the bus isn't there and you have to call your supervisor and you're afraid you're going to get fired. That needs to stop happening. Or if you're a parent, or working parents, also having a parent when you need to go to work yourself, but now the bus doesn't arrive, and if you don't have a car, how are you supposed to get your child to work or to school? And how are you able to get to work on time? I've had parents who cannot get to work on time because they are trying to get their child to school. That is unfair, it is inequitable. When we talk about disparate impacts and equity, we need to really look at this issue seriously.
And which state was that where you relied on the bus?
I mean, I've relied on public transportation for a large part of my life. When I was, when it impacted me the most was when I was in my late teens and I was living by myself and I was working 2 jobs and trying to finish up my last year of high school, and I needed to go both ways. And as you know, I was raised South Shore of Massachusetts. But that year, where I didn't have anything and I was working 2 jobs, the inability, if public transportation wasn't available to me, it might have meant that I lost my job, or I would walk into class late and somebody would think I was a bad student, and that wasn't the case. And so you have to think about what it means to the student when they have to walk into a class late and it's not their fault, but everybody turns and looks at them like it is. We need to worry about the individuals that are being impacted.
Where does this issue rank in terms of urgency to your mind?
I mean, in terms of urgency, I mean, this is something that we can just solve. I mean, that is the thing that's so infuriating to me, is that this is a problem that can be solved with intervention that is measured, but is also, it's about a level of interest. This should not be a crisis. This is a lack of leadership that has led to a crisis. There's a difference. And this has to stop. So we have crisis after crisis that is not, it is not just a crisis that happened, it is a crisis of failure of leadership. And voters have the ability to make a decision and reject that by voting for him. You will not get a leader that professes helplessness, which is what we get with Dan McKee. He can solve these problems, but you have to want to do the work.
Ashley, what's the latest on? I know you briefly mentioned it in the Riotcast Wars. I know we're still waiting to get those back. What's your latest comments, McKee, on calling him to release them?
I am consistent. Release the Riotcast scores. Parents and teachers deserve those scores. You've been caught lying. The best thing that you can do, of course, the best thing that you can do is release the scores. You know, this is also another crisis of his own making. And it is so disrespectful to parents and teachers to have the scores delayed. Enough is enough. It is a series of failures of leadership that need to have a consequence. You know, we are going into a tough time with a recession, and we also do have an educational crisis. We need a responsible leader that will be able to deliver bad news and come up with a legitimate, credible plan to get us out of some of these crises, and also not create new crises, as what happened with busing. This didn't need to happen. There was plenty of advance notice to mitigate the impact, but what happened instead? He did nothing, and children are not getting to school. That's not leadership, and there should be a consequence for a failure of leadership. What about those kids who didn't get to school, or those parents who are late to work, or individuals who can't get to doctor's appointments? There is a real-life impact on individuals, and I don't want to hear when Dan talks about caring about equity and community issues when the impacts are so disparate in terms of who is impacted and who is not.
Should parents be concerned that these scores haven't been released?
Yes, parents should be concerned, not only for their individual child, but what it means for somebody who is going to be able to lead the state forward. We have an education crisis, which means we need somebody who is honest, who has integrity, and who will talk about the difficult steps that are needed in order to move us forward as a state. Someone who hides scores until after the election cannot be trusted to move us forward in this difficult path of education reform. It is not going to be easy, but we need somebody who will do the hard work, who will be honest, and who will bring us together as a community, because it is going to take a community to change the educational outcomes of this generation, and we can do it together, but we cannot do it with leadership like this.
I have 2 questions.
Yes.
Since you brought up these 3 short-term plans that you have to resolve the issue, would you look into, if issues continue to persist, possibly privatizing, the RIPTA buses?
I actually think that is going way too far, because really the issue is that we have a staffing shortage. We don't pay a competitive wage, so I don't think that going to that solution is appropriate. I think that we have a staffing crisis. We also need to make sure that a contract is negotiated and we are competitive. And so if we can have a reasonable solution, which is what I presented, to get us through this time, and then have leadership that works on issues of affordability in the state, making sure that we have a transportation system that is run by transportation experts, we'll get there. We don't need to move to privatization because we have a problem that's caused by Dan McKee's failed leadership. The best solution is to get rid of Dan McKee.
then going on the solution that you just presented, I know you brought up how this is a crisis across the state. Say in 3 weeks of the election, if Dan McKee is elected, is this something that you would work with him and have him use your plan that you've outlined today to solve this crisis in the state?
I plan to be governor, and what I will say is that if he would like to right now, instead of waiting until election, take my plans and use them to help the people of Rhode Island, I will thank him because my plans are legitimate. They're based in, they're realistic solutions, and so I would ask him to stop rejecting good ideas for political purposes. My solutions are rooted in policy and the ability to solve problems. I've done that my entire career. So if he wants my help, I'm happy to help him, but I believe that I should be governor. The people of Rhode Island deserve a governor who can solve problems and get things done. You'll get that with me. You won't get that with Dan McKee. Asking me to be his assistant is not appropriate. We deserve a leader who can actually lead and get things done, which is what I'll say.
Anybody else? We getting taxes today?
I don't know what. Am I getting taxes today? I've already
Are you
paid my
releasing your taxes today?
Oh,
Today.
more taxes.
It's looking like it'll be tomorrow. But tomorrow the latest. You can keep a revert taxes?
They're filed. Am I getting? They were filed on time, so I think it's a matter of getting them. I know you're all eagerly awaiting them. I'm sorry we were unable to use that to deliver the RIPTA scores. It was my hope. And what I'll say is I believe in transparent and accountable government, which is the reason that Dan McKee was calling for my tax returns. So he will have my tax returns, and now that I would ask that if he really believes that, then he should release RIPTA scores, or if he's struggling to do that, which I can help him with figuring out that problem as well, he can release something that we know he has, which is subpoenas for his administration. So if he truly believes in being an accountable, transparent government, I'd ask him, I did my part, now you do yours. Release the subpoenas. We know he has them. If you don't know, I can point you to 3 of them that exist that we know of. And he knows 2.
Quick question. The Senate Minority Leader has again, for the second time in as many months, called for oversight hearings specifically on this issue. And yet, predictably, we hear crickets from the legislature.
Which issue? There are so many issues that he's
I believe it was on the RICAS.
Transportation, use of federal funds.
Yeah.
Which one?
I think this one was the RICAS. The true sounds of the city.
I love the city.
It really is. But
whenever I'm here, we moved out to the suburbs, so if you have kids, you got to do it. But I miss it.
But the point overall is that the legislature continues to refuse to inject itself in just about every issue in which they legitimately have oversight. How do you get the legislature to step up if, in fact, the governor won't?
So let me back up and say that if you believe in transparency and accountability, you should be able to lead that way. So with me, I'm available to you. I'll answer questions and I'll give you the things you want. So as from a governor, yes, so the legislature, yes, there should be oversight. That is their role. But you also should expect a governor that is accountable, transparent, and able to answer questions versus hiding or making excuses, which is what you have with Dan McKee. So it's yes, oversight is necessary, but it's necessary to help when you have a problem like Dan McKee. With me, I'm not always going to give good news because you can't. There's not always good news. But you'll get someone who tells the truth and also lays out a plan to the problems that we have. I mean, the staffing shortage is a staffing shortage, but the failure to get involved and to really explain what the problem is, that's a failure of leadership. And you cannot profess helplessness in a state this small as governor. You have to want to do the job. I want to do the job. Dan McKee, I don't know where he is, but the job of being the governor of Rhode Island is different than being the governor of a large state. It is